Good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning I'm going to continue talking about the Four Bodhisattva Vows. First lecture was on what it means to take vow itself. Then we talked about the first of the vows, beings are numberless, I vow to carry them across. The second is delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. So we talked about that last time. And this time we're going to talk about Dharma Gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. And the last one is Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it, which is what I'll talk about next week. And of course, if you want to hear any of these lectures, they're on the website. If you want to hear and see them, they're on YouTube. So, Dharma Gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. So Dharma Gates is a translation of the word homon, Japanese word homon, which in Sanskrit is Dharma Paryaya. So what it means is that it's a method of teaching in which the teacher knows what is most helpful for that person to hear. And traditionally, Shakyamuni Buddha was able to talk to an assembly of thousands and millions of people in which everybody heard exactly what they needed to hear. So this is a Dharma Paryaya, is a way of teaching or method of teaching or giving a Dharma discourse in which everything is very helpful. The teacher knows what is most helpful to the listener. And so in that way, it's a kind of skillful means. Now, the Chinese word for homon is fa men. And fa men literally means Dharma gate. So it seems pretty clear that homon is a direct translation of the Chinese word fa men. And fa men refers to, as the Sanskrit does, to a teaching or a way to access or approach the Buddha Dharma. So that's kind of technically what we're talking about here when we say Dharma gate. But I think in our school and our understanding, Dharma gate is a broader concept. In the text Zazengi, Dogen wrote, Zazen is the Dharma gate, homon, the Dharma gate of great ease and joy. I believe he also said that in the Fukan Zazengi. So here Dogen is saying, well, Dharma gate is Zazen. Specifically, it's a Zazen. It's about Zazen. And so for this reason, Zazen is considered one of the primary Dharma gates or entrances to our Soto Zen practice. So when we formally sit Zazen, our minds, our bodies ideally open up to a direct experience of our life with myriad things that unfold at this very moment, that we sit still for and we presence ourselves for, our life as it is just in that moment of sitting Zazen. We're aware of what's going on around us. And that's why when we sit with our eyes open. We sit with an alertness. We say, think non-thinking. Shohaku Okumura describes this as letting the gears unhook in your mind. So it's as if you're a car running in idle. And this deep presencing for what's happening. And of course, Zazen also refers to our life, the Zazen of our life, that we are doing that in our life. So when Dogen says Zazen, the Dharma gate of great ease and joy is Zazen, we can either understand it and should understand it, I think, because he's talking about formal Zazen, but he also talks about Zazen as our life. So Zazen is not about entering some trance state or losing contact with reality or going somewhere else in our mind. It really is about just being present for our life as it is in this moment. So that's why Zazen is considered a primary Dharma gate in our school. In another fascicle, Dogen talks about Dharma Gates. This fascicle is Shobogenzo Kaisei San Shoku, sounds of the stream, forms of the mountain. And this is what the Eihei Hotsu Gonmon comes from, which is what everybody studied with Daijaku last year. So part of that vow is, Dogen said, he said, I pray that although I have accumulated evil deeds in the past and have causes and conditions that obstruct the way, the Buddhas and ancestors, taking pity on me, will liberate me from the bonds of my deeds and remove my hindrances to studying the way. So remove my hindrances to studying the way, that their merit and Dharma gates will fill and pervade everywhere the inexhaustible Dharma realm. So Dogen said, I pray, I vow, I hope. Although I have accumulated evil deeds in the past and have causes and conditions that obstructed the way. So although all the causes and conditions of our life, our genetics, our family, all those things, our experiences that create the kleshas and create the neuroses, if you will, to use a Western psychological term, all of these things that get in our way of understanding the Dharma, get in our way of understanding the Buddhas and ancestors. He says, may the Buddhas and ancestors take pity on me and liberate me. May the teachings of the Buddhas and ancestors liberate me from the bonds of the past things that I have done that are not skillful and remove my hindrances to studying the way, to being able to actually enter the Dharma gate of the Buddha way. And then he says that their merit and Dharma gates will fill and pervade everywhere the inexhaustible Dharma realm, and that they will share their compassion with me, and that they will share their compassion with me. So these Dharma gates, the Dharma gates of the Buddhas and ancestors, are the way in which we understand and have access to the Dharma itself as taught by those Buddhas and ancestors. The prayer that these Dharma gates will fill and pervade everywhere means, to my mind, that everywhere Dharma gates are pervasive. Dharma gates are everywhere. There is no place that they are not existing. So Dharma gates are boundless. So Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Dharma gates are everywhere. Dharma gates are our life. They are without end and measure or amount. So every person that you meet, every situation that you encounter, every thought that you have, all of it, all of this, every part of our life that we could name is a possible Dharma gate that will enrich us and others and enlighten us and others and ourselves. So these are the places, the beings, the times that come forth and enlighten each moment, each interaction and situation and thought that we're having. So a Dharma gate can be anything that you're experiencing. A Dharma gate can be any relationship that you're having, any thought that you're having. A Dharma gate can be going to a movie. A Dharma gate can be washing dishes. A Dharma gate can be talking to a friend. A Dharma gate can be the things that are hardest for you to do. So in my one way that I want to talk about how we can explore perhaps more deeply what a Dharma gate is to look at the famous koan collection. The title of that koan collection is Mumonkan. So I would like to talk about Mumonkan a little bit. Mumonkan means gateless gate. And it was published in 1228 by Mumon, whose name also means no gate. So the three characters of Mumonkan are Mu, which is no or empty of inherent existence. It can be used either way. Mon means gate, And Khan refers to a gateway or barrier. So in some ways, whenever we see gateless gate, usually that last part is not translated Khan, although it's a very important part of the title or the understanding of what it means to say Muman Khan. So we say, why is this a gateless gate? And why is this a gate as a barrier simultaneously? And how is this about Dharma Gates and the Bodhisattva vow? So if you say that when you are awakened, or when we are awakened, when we are engaged in realized action, there is no gate. So we say that's a gateless gate, the Muman Khan, the gateless gate. But until that time that we actually are completely in accord with any given situation, then we encounter barriers, we encounter gates that block our ability to respond. So essentially, and to engage in realized action. So I would say much of our practice, this is the Bodhisattva practice, right? The Bodhisattva, to carry all across, in our translation, to save all beings, to take beings across from delusion to realization through our own understanding, our own difficulties, our own realization, and through those realizations also through our actions, not necessarily through teaching somebody verbally, telling them what they should do. Through those actions, we also, with all other beings, engage in realization. So we have this ability to respond with realized action. So when our true nature is blocked by kleshas expressing themselves, then we are caught. Then we are not able to enter into a Dharma gate, nor are we experiencing what's being called in the Muman Khan the gateless gate. So I wanted to kind of explore what kinds of gates there are based on this idea in the Muman Khan. So again, when we fully understand the reciprocal nature of awakening, we can enact our understanding. There's no gate. There's no barrier. So in Genjo Koan, Dogen called this, he said, to allow myriad things to come and meet us would be the gateless gate. It would be this way in which we completely meet our life without thinking about it at all. There's no barrier, no gate. There's just things as they are, arising, meeting them. So we don't experience any kind of resistance or any kind of barrier to this understanding. So this is Mu Dharma Gate. It is invisible because we are completely in accord with the teachings. We are in accord with the myriad things arising and coming forward. And so it just is not a gate. It just is something that we enter into without even being aware of or thinking about. So I would say that's one way to talk about this. Another way to talk about not perceiving the gate is because we're so caught up in our delusions that we do what Dogen calls carrying the self forward, that we don't realize that something's amiss. I would say this kind of delusion causes a blindness to the gate. It's like we don't realize we're running into it. We don't realize that it's there. We don't realize that we're not entering into it. So that's another way. I'm going to go back later on and talk about examples of this. That's another way when we perceive or don't even understand, and we think that there's no gate, but actually we're running smack into a wall. Sometimes we intellectually know about Dharma gates. We perceive that we are faced with this gate, but we can't enter. And we can't enter because of some kind of resistance to doing the practice, or because it's just so scary to enter into that gate that we just can't budge beyond the entrance. We just stand there unable to step across the threshold. So that's another way that we can talk about Dharma gates and our relationship to them. Another way is that we acknowledge the gate and we enter the gate, even when it may not be our first choice of action. Opening the gate may require some Dharma muscle on our part. We have to lean on our small mind to persuade ourselves to let go, to stop clinging, and to find the place of letting go. So sometimes that's how we experience a Dharma gate. Sometimes we tumble through the gate through no intention of our own. It's like, there we are on the other side of the gate. Because our life force forces us or compels us to engage in entering this gate, we probably think we're doing something else. And then we realize, oh, I just went through a Dharma gate. We look back and we see the gate. We didn't see it when we were going through it, but we look back and go, oh yeah, that was a Dharma gate. So earlier I quoted Dogen as saying, Dharma gates will fill and pervade everywhere the inexhaustible Dharma realm. Dharma gates will fill and pervade everywhere the inexhaustible Dharma realm. So I will remind you that every place, every time, every thought, every relationship, everything that we do, every situation is potentially a Dharma gate. This is if we think of Dharma gate as being a way to enter into enacting the Dharma. This actual passage, if you will, that we go through, this transition that we engage in. So everything is potentially a Dharma gate. Everything is the gateless gate. Everything is koan. Koan, what? What? What is it? What is happening here? How is this? Sometimes entering a Dharma gate is like having a great ball of fire stuck in your throat. You cannot swallow it and you can't cough it up. You cannot let go. During the Shuso ceremony, the Shuso says, I am like a mosquito biting an iron bull. We are like mosquitoes biting this iron bull of life, trying to enter into the Dharma gate. Maybe sometimes we try too hard. Maybe sometimes that little mosquito should just flip over on its back, have a drink, check out, relax, enjoy the surf, and not be aware that it's sitting on the back of an iron bull. And then at other times, we just have to try to bite that iron bull, just like that little mosquito. So in the last talk, we talked about delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. So we talked about kleshas last time, we talked about delusion. And I quoted Dogen from Kato, or Twining Vines, as pointing out that these problems are where we transform. Suzuki Roshi talked about this a lot. He said, your problems are the Dharma gate of transformation. And that makes total sense, because when we're not having a problem, we're kind of in that state of either we don't know or everything's going just fine. But when we do have problems and we want to solve those problems, we want those problems to be transformed. And we're working on that, and we're using the Buddha Dharma as our guide. That is a Dharma gate that we can see and recognize. And those Dharma gates, those problems, are the source of our wisdom. Where else does your wisdom come from? If you have no problems in your life, if you've never had any problems, if you've never experienced grief, if you've never experienced joy, it's not necessarily a problem, but never experienced all of the ups and downs of being a human being and worked with those experiences and come to some kind of peace, if you will, equanimity, what is it that you can impart to somebody else who is experiencing those experiences? And that's why we want to talk to somebody who's had the same experience that we have. So these problems are not things to be rejected, nor are they things to relate to as if they're some kind of horrible failure on our part that we should feel guilty about and try to run away from. These are the Dharma Gates. So truly, your wisdom comes from your delusion. It comes from this transformation. So do not despair of the things that you need to work on in your life. They're actually exactly the place where our practice resides and wisdom is developed. So I want to go back to the examples I gave earlier about the different kinds of Dharma Gates and give you some specific, scenarios of how you might think about these. So one of them was, the first one was, we fully understand the reciprocal nature of awakening, and we can enact that understanding, and there is no gate. We do not experience a barrier at all. So let me give you an everyday example of this. So I went to Trader Joe's a few weeks ago, and I hadn't been there since the pandemic began. So I didn't know the procedures for standing in line, which are pretty specific at Trader Joe's. And I found it a little confusing. But I watched the person ahead of me and so I watched what the person ahead of me was doing, and I watched what the clerk was doing. And by doing that, by the time I got up to the place where I needed to do something, I'd kind of figured out what was happening, and so there wasn't a problem. And the next time I went to Trader Joe's, I was like an old hand. I knew exactly what was going on, and I didn't have to think about it at all. And I didn't have any emotions come up around it. It was just there, I just did it. So here's an example of when there's no barrier there. It's like we're integrated with the totality of the situation. We're not resisting it. We're just doing whatever it is that is required in that moment for us to be doing. So we don't have to think about it. We're comfortable. We're not resisting. We're just responding. I would say to you that this is a gateless gate. It doesn't have to be some kind of special experience. You're doing these things all the time in your life. So what about this other example about you don't perceive that there's a gate because your delusion is so great that you don't see that there is a gate. So you think you experience, maybe you say, well, there's no gate because you're so caught in your delusion, carrying yourself forward that we don't realize that something's amiss. So this is a kind of delusion that causes blindness. So here's my example for that. If I go to Trader Joe's and encounter a situation I don't like how their procedure is for standing in line, and I perceive this as some kind of hindrance to my sense of self or my personal space, and I get really vocal and I get righteous about it, and I know that I know the right way, and I let people know that I know the right way, but I don't see that I'm causing distress to other people, then I would say this is an example of not perceiving the gate at all because of our delusion. This is an example, as Dogen says in Genjo Koan, is carrying the self forward in an unwholesome way. So this is one reason in practice it is so important to perceive that there is a problem. So we come up with coping strategies in our lives that seem to work pretty well. And when we do that, we don't notice that they're not really working until something catastrophic really pushes us to see that the things we're doing don't work. So, for example, if your coping strategy is shopping, you might not realize you're spending too much money that you can't afford until it's too late. So we might need to pay attention to our spending and honestly see what's happening with our finances But we don't notice that until one day we figure out that we're only paying the interest on our credit card and not the balance. And it's just going on year after year after year, and we can't afford this. And so we're getting into trouble in a lot of other areas, financial areas of our lives. So remedying a problem like this involves actually dealing with our compulsive need to shop, which has to do with fixing our finances, but it also has to do with working with our own emotional response to our life. It has to do with looking at these underlying issues. It is a very big Dharma gate. So we need to wake up and see that we have this opportunity to work with this problem. If we tend towards anger, we may be righteous about it and not notice that people are afraid of us, are pushed back in unskillful ways. And that the reason this is happening is because of our own unskillful behavior. So in the Dharma, our job is to notice how other people are responding to us and do the hard work of transforming our behavior. And then sometimes we intellectually know about Dharma gates and that we are faced with the Dharma gate, but we can't enter the Dharma gate because of some kind of resistance, or maybe because it's just so scary, we just can't budge beyond the entrance. And that may be one of the things that's happening when we're engaging in a kind of compulsive behavior that's not working for us. So if I'm at Trader Joe's and I perceive that I'm upset and I see that how things should go, and I know from my practice that I'm not engaging in my practice, I'm not entering into this Dharma gate, then I try to become aware and remember my vow to calm down, remember my vow that I actually want to be in accord with and in harmony with all beings, specifically now with the customers and clerks and the workers at Trader Joe's. So I'm caught, maybe I'm still caught in my klesha around this. So this is this ball caught in your throat. You can't swallow it and you can't cough it up. Sometimes we're so caught in these unworking coping strategies that we just can't see the problem. So we turn away. But as a practitioner, when I know that there's a problem and I have a tremendous resistance to the remedy, this can be very distressing to us when we're working on something, when we sincerely want to change, but we can't find the tools to break through the dilemma. So I'm panicked by a situation, I'm gripped by delusion, or overcome with desire or compulsion, and I cannot seem to find a middle ground. What can I do? How can I enter this gate? How can I avoid turning away? This is that fire that I cannot swallow or spit up. And this is the time of refuge. This is the time that we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. This is the time that we take refuge in our teachers, our Dharma teachers, our teachers who are therapists, our teachers who are our friends. This is the time that we ask others who've been through this and have the wisdom to guide us. This is the time that we take up the Dharma teachings. This is the time that we engage with Sangha, that we engage as we always engage. This is one of the reasons we engage in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, is so that it nurtures and holds us. And when we are in trouble, it is there for us. We cling to the gate when we are in despair. We cling to the pillars that support that gate, and we pray for refuge in the Dharma. We can't go beyond the gate, and we should not turn away from the gate. So we must set up camp by the gate and hold on until our compulsion, our greed, our delusion, our anger and grief transforms or passes. Particularly, we use the Dharma teachings and seek help from our teachers and support from our Sangha. And then another example is sometimes we acknowledge the gate and we enter the gate. Even when it may not be our first choice, this is the way in which we practice. We use those Dharma muscles. We have to lean on our small mind to let go. Sometimes we have to say, Shinshu, this is not your vow. This is not the practice that I want to engage in. So please, please be patient now. Since I have a tendency to be impatient, take a deep breath and be patient. Look at your cell phone. Read the New York Times on your cell phone while you're waiting. Get over it. We can do this. Sometimes we have to be stern with ourselves and say, yes, this is in my capacity to do it. I'm not going to be lazy. I'm actually going to do the practice here. And then the example is sometimes we just tumble through the gate. No intention of our own, but because life forces us to face or engage entering that gate. And formal practice can do this. We want to be engaged, and maybe we're a little caught up wanting to succeed at the Dharma Center that we're in, and we're motivated by that as well as being attracted to the practice itself. So maybe our motivations are a little, little of this, a little of that. When I was at San Francisco Zen Center, I really wanted to be one of the big kids. I can see my hands disappearing, one of the big kids. And one way to do that was to be a person who hit bells, to become a doan and work behind the scenes during ceremonies and becoming part of the doan group or the doan Rio. But as I did this, I discovered that the activity of doing the doan jobs opened up Dharma gates that I didn't know were there, that I had no idea that I was getting into. I saw sides of myself that I had not resolved, like wanting to be perfect or being overly critical of others who I did not perceive as being critical, which of course meant I was being critical of myself as well. So that's a Dharma gate that I kind of fell into. Maybe if I had known what I was getting into, I wouldn't have gone through that Dharma gate. But I was compelled by various reasons, and so I didn't know the real joy and beauty of that experience until I looked back on it. So we're going to talk more about this in the next vow, which is Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. What is Buddha's way? But in closing, I'll say that we must enter every Dharma gate. It's called life. Life is a Dharma gate. Whether we want to or not, those gates sometimes loom up and say, come on in. Maybe the water's fine, maybe it's not. Jaku's cousin once told me about going to the gym. She said, sometimes you go grumpy, but you go. That really struck me. Sometimes you go grumpy, but you go. So no matter how we enter or we don't enter each moment of our life is truly a Dharma gate, waiting and inviting us to enter. It's a very big gift that life is giving us. Sometimes we go joyously and we're very happy to be alive. Sometimes we are afraid. Sometimes we are oblivious. Sometimes we go grumpy. But no matter how you go, you go. Thank you.